Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the An-Nisa Collective podcast. As always, I'm your host, Niyab, and let's get straight into it because we always have so much to talk about. So today we're going to be discussing mental health. Specifically mental health in today's society. Everyone on the podcast today is currently living in the UK, so it'll be that sort of Western society and those influence that we'll have a discussion about today. So before we begin, could you both introduce yourself, please?
Assalamu alaikum, this is Samia. I'm a doctor and an entrepreneur, and I've been on these podcasts. Inshallah, looking forward to discussing mental health today.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Tahmina. I'm really looking forward to actually discussing this. I've got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it, girls.
Yeah, so as I said, we're going to be talking about mental health. I think it's a very current topic, something we're hearing a lot more about these days, especially with younger generations, and how the age for when mental health issues diagnosed or self-diagnosed, that we see a lot of now, is actually reducing in terms of the age that kids are being made aware of it and what they're feeling. So we just wanted to have that discussion today. What we wanted to look at today was specifically in society and the impact that the society we live in has on that. So first of all, I'd just like to open up the discussion and ask you guys, what do you think, well, how would you define mental health, first of all? So what does it mean to you when I say mental health?
I think that's a really, really good place to start, because I think recently in particular, mental health is being used for political purposes. So I think if we look back about 20, 30 years, mental health almost didn't exist really in society, right, as an overt thing. But now it just feels like almost, especially if you look at the left-wing side of things, that mental health is used as the peg to hang every possible excuse for not doing something or for doing something inappropriate, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that we all, at least between us, understand what we're saying when we're talking about mental health. And I think mental health is a state of the mind, isn't it? And that state of our mind then impacts the way that we think, the way that we behave, the way that we respond to things, and also, our ability to cope with day-to-day pressures, challenges, stress, which we all have in our lives, right? But, it's how well we kind of navigate our way through that, depending on what the state of our mind is. And that in turn is affected by so many different things. And given the fact that we're all very different as individuals, obviously each of us will have our own unique ways of being able to navigate our way around the challenges in society and the different situations that we find ourselves in. But I think that's what mental health is. I mean, I don't know what.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself, to be honest. You've hit all the nails on the head. But I just think that there's a lot of misinterpretation and self-interpretation. Depression can take many forms. Anxiety can take many forms. OCD can take many forms. And I keep reiterating this about being aware not to self-diagnose. So if someone feels that they are suffering from some kind of mental health, that we should all be supportive and not belittle that person's feelings. And try and go down the right avenues to be diagnosed. For example, the NHS have got really good, although there's a lot of crisis going on. We don't need to get into that. That's a whole different topic, but they do have, they've spent a lot on mental health, and I know we've mentioned this before, but they have spent a lot of mental health, and there is a lot of help there. Sometimes just talking to someone close to you can really help as well. So inshallah, I always just want to keep reiterating that. Don't let anyone else diagnose you, someone who doesn't have the capability or professional background, and don't diagnose yourself by reading, Instagram posts, something that I'm going to discuss again.
I think both of you sort of hit the nail on the head. That's kind of why I went silent, because I was like, I don't really know what else to add. But I think what you just touched on as well, Tamina, that self-diagnosis is you end up in this just awful circle. You just make yourself worse. It's like, when you have a chest like you have a bad cough and your chest is hurting, and then you Google it, and then it says, you could have a chest infection, or you could have this, and then it's like cancer or death.
Yeah,
And
I
I feel
know.
like, it's the same with mental health, except with physical ailments, I think it's a lot easier to determine whether you're feeling better or not, or say, actually, no, it's probably not that. Whereas with mental health, there's just so many unknowns. And like you said, on Dr. Sami, it's so individual that it's really hard to generalize. And you think, oh my God, do I have anxiety, or then do I have
And
depression? Or
with mental health, actually, I read earlier that there's a study that they were conducted, that our mental health is very closely connected to the gut. So we actually have physical,
yeah.
physical repercussions of being stressed. So, for example, you might feel nauseous, headaches, dizziness. I mean, I get all of the above. But when when I feel a bit sad or anxious about the state of the world, even, I mean, there are lots of things that we get anxious about, and a lot of things that we're exposed to. Internet is a wonderful thing, but it can also be a curse simultaneously, having so much information. But it can actually have a physical effect on us, where we're losing sleep, where we're becoming frustrated, angry, short fused with our parents, our siblings, our children, our husbands, our wives. Mental health does affect a whole range of things, and that's why, I mean, this topic is so important.
I think
To
it's
address.
important to remember as well that, we're holistic people. And I think often that's forgotten in conventional medicine, actually. So when you have a physical illness, the focus is just on the physical symptoms and curing or giving remedies for the physical symptoms. But of course, that has a mental impact, right? So if you're ill, you're not going to feel elated, are you, emotionally? Okay. And emotions, I think, are so strongly linked to our state of mind, right? And I think that's one of the reasons as well why it's, like Nayabi mentioned, like when it comes to mental health, it's very difficult to be objective about it. I think that's the key thing here, because it does involve emotions, right? And sometimes when those emotions become so overwhelming, we begin to dissociate ourselves from being able to have insight objectively into what's actually going on. So I think, along with mental health, everything else that I said, I think also the emotional state plays an important role, and the interaction of that with the physical. So as an example, if someone we love passes away, obviously we're going to be sad, right? But in that state of sadness, we will also maybe not feel hungry. Okay,
Yes.
so we will not eat, and then that has an impact on our physical well-being. We will not sleep, maybe, right? And
Yes.
again, that has an impact on our physical well-being. So it is important to remember that we are holistic people, and you can't split us and divide us into like
Yes.
a mental component and then a physical component, a spiritual component. They're all very, very interlinked. And I think this brings me on to the fact that mental health, it's an amalgamation of lots of different factors. And broadly speaking, I would say that those factors fall into specific domains. One of them is psychological. Another one is, there's something that I've added in, okay, spiritual, okay, you can call it cultural, okay, or, your belief, what is your norms, your values, right?
Yes.
Then there's the social aspect, okay, so there's psychological, social, spiritual, and then of course the biological, right? So all of these factors, and there's lots of details within these factors, right? They kind of interplay, interact, and converge on a very unique individual. So no two people will necessarily be in the same mental state, despite having the same, for example, biological influences or the same psychological influences. You will have, different outcomes, and you'll have different states of mental health.
Yeah, totally agree. And so what we're saying basically is that it is extremely complex. And I think in society it just gets so simplified that it becomes quite dangerous. So how do you think, as a result of that, mental health is perceived in society?
I think we talked, earlier about how there has to be some kind of objectivity, isn't it? Yeah, to decide. And this is where, like, kind of, medicine comes in, isn't it? Like when I say medicine, I mean the world of medicine. Okay, so there are certain diagnostic criteria that are applied to then diagnose somebody with some kind of mental health illness like depression. So, you know, there's clinical depression, which is very different to just being sad. Okay. There is, for example, certain psychotic symptoms, like, for example, having auditory hallucinations. Okay. So basically hearing things that aren't there.
Wow.
That can be a feature, for example, of schizophrenia. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want everyone panicking, thinking, oh my God, I thought I did hear something and it didn't exist. And, you know, do I have schizophrenia? It's, you know, but the point is that there are certain objective parameters that we can use. And this is why, Tahmina, you know, you were saying that if you feel that you have a mental health disorder, you do need to see a, you know, professional and get that kind of objective assessment. But generally speaking, I think in various pockets of society, mental health is perceived in different ways. But I think more importantly, what we have to look at is what are the different societal factors that contribute to mental health. Because like we were saying earlier, you know, like politically, it's being used so loosely now. It's like, oh, you know, I didn't turn up to work. Why? Oh, because I had a mental health problem. Okay, but what was that? You know, did you get a certificate from a doctor? Was it, you know, like, what do you mean? Or, you know, a celebrity will say something inappropriate on social media and they'll hang that inappropriate behavior on some kind of mental health issue. Okay.
Yeah.
But then does that justify that behavior? You know, like, you know, as Muslims, we believe that we're accountable for everything that we do. The only time when that accountability is lifted is when literally we're insane, isn't it? Yeah. So that level of insanity is when you're actually not even aware of what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're aware of what you're doing, you can't say, you can't justify it, or you can't escape any kind of accountability by saying I'm having a mental health issue. We all, yeah, exactly. We all suffer from different states of mental health, right, throughout our lives. Okay.
It's like
Sometimes,
hiding behind it, isn't it? Like
yeah,
you're using it as a cloak
Yeah.
for your behavior and for your actions. And I think we should be mindful of it. I mean, you were speaking generally, and I'm going to speak more on a personal level, in terms of how, on a daily basis, my so-called mental health can be affected. I'm a mother, and we have other children in our family as well. And I feel like sometimes I'm quite anxious. I find myself on social media reading about, you know, things that happen behind closed doors to children. You know, everybody knows about the online predators and things like that. And I'm always anxious. You know, if I put the children in front of the TV, I'm wondering, oh my God, are they going to watch, you know, 1 hour of Coco Melon, and then something really weird is going to pop up, like a challenge, which then prompts them to, you know, astaghfirullah, like commit suicide, because those are the things that are actually happening. And it's really, really depressing. And then I stay awake for hours just looking at things that I just don't need to look at, but I'm just constantly sifting through it. And what that does is it creates a I sort of I feel like I'm sort of doing it to myself, you know, where I'm looking at things, and the whole purpose of something like social media is to capture us. So they pick us up, we go through their algorithms, you know, and the algorithm goes, right, she likes this and she likes that, so that we need to keep presenting it so that they capture us, so that we keep returning. You know, the more we return, the revenue they get. But actually what's happening is that it's damaging me, you know. um that's not to say, oh, let's be alien and ignorance is bliss. I don't mean that at all. Yeah, we are supposed to gain certain knowledge, but there are things where it's like, I was talking to you both earlier and saying that I quite like food. So the algorithm of food keeps coming up, of men, those hunters who cook in the forest, and it's all brilliant. And I live in central London. I mean, I'm never going to dig a hole, put a lamb in it, throw coal over it, and just watch it cook. Like, I'm never going to do that. But I keep watching it, and it's like an addiction. And then I'm staying awake, and I'm like, oh, you know, one day when I'm out of the city and I live in the countryside, oh, I'm going to build that hut out of mud, and I'm going to do it's just bizarre. Like, I don't know why, and it affects my sleep. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm cranky, and I'm like, put your socks on, for no reason, because I've just done it to myself. Now, it's like what you were saying earlier, that you know, celebrities hiding behind, um, you know, the cloak of mental health. I could wake up in the morning and be really rude to my spouse, and then say, "Oh, sorry, I was up all night. I didn't have any sleep." Not telling anyone the reason why, that I'm watching those hunters making those food, but I'm just like, "Oh, I'm so cranky. I didn't have, you know, I didn't get my good sleep. I was just up anxious and I was just thinking about how to escape central London and live in a forest. Like, I'm not going to finish my sentence, am I? I'm just sort of going to use it as an excuse.
Mm,
So
mm.
that's why I keep going back to not self-diagnosing ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we are really feeling something, then we need to, go to doctors,
I think
professionals.
there's a fine line though in terms of social media, because I think it's a great thing in
Yeah,
certain right. So
no, it is.
it's when you
Yeah.
cross that line, right? And that the point you're making is it's so easy to just get drawn in,
Hmm.
and then have those negative effects on your mental health. But it's because you have to, it's your own, you're accountable for it, right? It's your own fault that you're scrolling through. I mean, I've been there as well. And the
Hmm.
other thing is then using those excuses, it makes it so much more difficult for those people who have genuine mental health issues, because
Yeah,
then we do start to generalize, right?
we do.
We're talking
Yes.
about certain examples of people using mental health. So when you do have that employee who
Yeah.
genuinely needs that day off because they're genuinely going through a depressive episode, or their mental health is down,
Hmm.
what is that manager going to think? I mean, we in this podcast alone, we made general comments about people using
Yeah.
mental health, right? So it's like, again, it ends up being this cycle. And
Hmm.
lastly, the thing, there was three things that came up in my mind as you guys were speaking. I think it's, for me, I'm also on TikTok. I also get some of those videos, Instagram. I mean, we spoke about this earlier, but I don't post, but I love like just seeing what everyone else is up to. I love getting loads of random
Yeah.
videos on my For You page, and like
Yeah.
learning things, but it's so easy
Hacks.
to get, yeah. The cleaning hacks, love
Oh
those.
gosh.
But it's so easy to get absolutely drawn in. And then I think
Yeah.
to those people who do end up posting, or who end up being so consumed with social media,
Hmm.
why is that? Because
Hmm.
Dr. Sam, you touched on it as well. We know that we're accountable for our actions, but for those of people who don't have that belief,
Hmm.
Mm.
right, it's so easy to have your world revolving around likes and shares, and
Yeah,
because you don't
yeah.
have that purpose in life.
It sort of becomes inevitable our mental health to be affected, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And I think, social media is one very important factor, societal factor that affects our mental health. But generally speaking, there's so much out there in society that not only influences, shapes, and molds, but I would say to a certain extent dictates our mental health, right?
Definitely.
Because especially for, I think, the younger audience, right? If you're constantly told that this particular fashion brand is what you need to wear,
Mm.
or
Yes,
this
exactly.
particular makeup brand is what you definitely need to look good. I
Own
mean,
only nude clothes. I mean, that's
yeah, exactly. I
just
mean,
put
what
away the reds
impact,
and the blacks.
it's almost dictating to you
Yes, yes.
what you should be wearing, how you should be
Yeah.
looking. And when you fall short of that expectation or that dictatorial, I'd say dictatorial, indoctrination, okay,
Yeah.
you are going to feel low. You're going to feel like you're missing out.
Inadequate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, inadequate. Yeah. And I mean, especially for girls, I would say, like, who, I mean, on the whole, I think it's a lot easier to break a girl's confidence, I would say, just from having that exposure and experience in seeing people in hospital. But, there's a fragility, isn't there, in confidence in some girls in particular. And if they're constantly being told by society that you're not good enough, because that's basically what these brands, the way they make out is that you're not good enough if you don't have this. You don't look good enough unless you wear this. You don't look good enough unless you cover that spot, with this particular product. Okay.
Like when we were younger, we had like billboards, didn't we? But now
Yeah.
what we have is filters, and it's one
Yeah.
click away from looking like with a sharp nose, and then what
Mm,
happens is that we can't look at ourselves in the mirror,
yeah.
sadly.
Yeah.
So many young girls have approached me, and we've had this conversation, and I feel like I'm having it over and over again. And where, oh my God, I don't like the picture that you've just taken. Put a filter on, Afa, put a filter on. And I'm like, okay, all right then, if you guys really want the filter, because
Yeah.
it actually happens that we don't like our features. We
Yeah.
need it to look that way. Before, when I was younger, it was sort of like, okay, billboards. Everyone used to be like, oh, it's always airbrushed, and I felt good about myself being a bit, rotund, yeah. But now it's like, oh my God, the filter, I can look like that. Like I just need one click and I can put the whole filter over my face and the person joining into the picture. Yeah, and we can have rabbit ears and it's all brilliant, you know? And it's so damaging to us because we don't actually like reality. When we go and spot ourselves in the mirror, like you're walking past a department store and you accidentally see yourself and you're, oh, who's that? You know? We actually start feeling like that because we want to look like our filter rather than what we are.
It's those societal pressures, isn't it? And then sorry, Dr. Sami, I was just
No,
gonna say,
I was just going to say before I forget, that the problem isn't with us. The problem isn't with our mental health.
yeah,
The problem is with society.
Absolutely.
And and this is the thing. I think if we want to make progress as far as our mental health is concerned, we can't really achieve progress unless we actually address the societal issues and factors that play into our, mental health. And if we're being told that we're not good enough and that our self-worth is measured by certain parameters that are really unrealistic, to be honest, if we're honest about it, it's really unrealistic to look, fresh and springy every single day, every single moment of your life. I mean, that's not real. Okay.
No, it's not. No.
It's not real. So what then people have a problem with is actually living in reality. And it's a reality that's created by society. And so what people have a problem with is this fake reality. I mean, I know it's a contradiction in terms, but that's really what it is, isn't it? It's, people are trying to live in this fake reality, and it's not something that as human beings we can actually physically be able to conform to. And therefore then you're constantly in this state of mind that you're just not good enough, that you're, and until we move that, it's going to be very difficult to move forward.
Yeah, you're constantly challenging yourself. I'm not wearing the right thing. I'm not speaking the right way. I don't look the right way. I haven't gone to the right restaurants, you know?
Yeah. And then that becomes your purpose in life,
Yes,
because
that's
you
it.
get
It takes
so
over.
drawn in, right?
Yeah.
And like we spoke about it, we're all, alhamdulillah, practicing Muslims. We try our best, right? But even we, and I'm not saying like I'm the top, Muslim there is or whatever. Like I said, we're all trying our best, but I find myself stuck in that, and I've got that link. I know what my purpose in life is. I have that faith, and it's just because it is just everywhere. Like you said, it's a societal issue. You just get drawn in, and then I end up thinking, I mean, we were talking about it, obviously this is a podcast so you can't see us, but I've got glitter on my eyelids at the moment, and I was really happy about trying this new glitter. And of course you can find happiness in those things, but how do you stop yourself from getting completely drawn in? And again, it's that fine line. You can enjoy those things, you can have those happy, you can use social media to the fullest, or get that dress because it is the trend, but when do you stop yourself from being having it so ingrained in your brain that you have to get it to fit in, that you're living in this, like you said, Dr. Sami, this fake reality, and the only way that you're going to survive or that you're good enough is to basically be a robot and
conform.
do what society. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, conform.
I feel like why should we have to let it affect our mental health and then ask that question? Because that's why we're all talking about social media in the context of mental health. It's only because it's affecting our mental health is now we're talking about it. It's like the medical experiments where they do it. They bring out a vaccine and they need 15 years to test it, and then they approve it for a human consumption or use. With social media, it never went through those kind of tests. I mean, it would have been impossible. So we're like the guinea pig generation. And now we're like, uh-oh, it's consumed me. And I'm hopeful for the next generation where they've seen us. We are the only generation that knows what a cassette is, and had Wi-Fi that did
I
this.
think maybe that's just me and you, Tahmina.
I know what a cassette is.
How you do.
I used to watch Sonic the Hedgehog on like tapes.
Oh,
I think
okay,
I was
fine.
the
So
weird,
you know what?
like, I think we're called millennials, like in the middle.
Okay, so I'm a millennial, and we still remember when internet was the modem.
Oh yeah, I don't remember that.
No. So yeah, you just missed that. But we also know the social media generation.
Yeah.
And we, my generation went, oh, I love this new social media thing. I want to get into it, and we started having children, but we were busy still being in awe of social media, and then going, oh, our kids might as well have it because we're so happy, so they're going to be happy. And now our kids are really going down a really dark rabbit hole,
Consumed.
and we're like, uh-oh. So I really it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to continue like this and get worse, or it's going to be what we now talk about, generational curse. We talk about it from in terms of looking up, right? And we say we don't want to continue certain generational curses. I'm quoting Instagram quotes that just keep coming across. But I hope our children turn around and say, well, I don't want that generational curse, that my parents were looking into it because they got social media and it was a shiny new toy. They gave it to us and we started, I'm sorry if this offends anyone, but we started self-harming, for example.
Mm.
I really hope that the next generation stop this generational curse that we started. It was us, we started it.
I
Our
think it is
generation invented it.
happening. I've seen it. I
Yeah.
mean, I also, what you were saying, I find it interesting. I think about when we were kids and we didn't really have social media, like MSN, I think, when I was younger. And even then I didn't really use it because we had like one of those old computers. And like being on both sides, so social media coming in my teenage years, I'm 24 years of age for context, and seeing that, but then like seeing kids who are now like my younger brother who's like born into it, and like that's why they're so consumed, because I think for us we can compare a little bit and we know what it was like without and with. It sounds like some sort of weird like curse or whatever, but it is because it's everywhere and it's all consuming. I think we are drawing to the end.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, I think with many other things in life, right, there's good and there's bad, depending on how you use it. And I think one of the things that this shows is that, look, at the end of the day, we are human, which is why we are going to be affected. And it doesn't matter how practicing, you rank yourself to be.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You're not.
Yeah, like you can't cut yourself away from society because that's exactly. So if society is promoting a certain lifestyle or promoting certain expectations or levels of perfection, right? There is very little escaping that, because none of us live in a vacuum. In a cave, right? So we're all going to be affected because we are human beings. And I think this is why it's so important, I think, to appreciate that if we want to move forward and improve our mental health as a society, then we need to start addressing societal factors and make an effort in changing those and addressing those. Because social media can be used for so much good. You can actually use social media to give the correct worth, which is beyond our skin and what we wear, right? So if social media was used for that purpose, then we would be in a different place mentally.
We need to be mindful of how we use it, and we need to. Sometimes it takes ourselves to be harsh to ourselves in order to become mindful. And I am being a bit harsh because of that reason, because we have to force ourselves to be mindful sometimes, because we're all in our own homes with our own phones. We have to tell it to ourselves now. It's time, to be mindful about what's good and what's bad.
But I think my point is that no matter how mindful we are, we're human and we're going to succumb at some level. So unless it's addressed on a higher level,
definitely. I agree with that.
It's a bit like what's happening with Twitter. All this is coming out, isn't it? After what's his name took over,
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, exactly. Yeah, and now you're realizing how Twitter was used, for so many like manipulations. So again, all of these are tools, that society will dictate how they use it. So I think we have to be really mindful of that, because all of these tools are used to shape our mental health. So if we want to change that, then we do definitely need to address it, on a societal level.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, like I was saying 5 minutes ago, I'm kidding. No, I think we're going to have to wrap up. I mean, it was a great discussion. It always is. I think we always end up carrying on. It's probably a topic that we'll touch on again, maybe from a different angle, but it's something that I think we can all speak to, and so we have so much to say about, and hopefully you guys gain something from listening to us, inshallah. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next episode.